Hey guys, we're out in the open today, very different to how I'm usually doing this. It's very early in the morning, it's 6 a.m. The reason I'm up so early is because I am so excited. No, that's entirely not true. I actually woke up because of a bad dream. Anyway, today is the last lesson of capture. So we're done with the first element out of the 5 of workflow. So I think that's a really good reason to celebrate. So next week, we're not going to have a new lesson. We're actually going to do a webinar together. It's going to happen at noon next week. That's Vancouver time. So if you're on the West Coast, you can think of it as a little lunch and learn kind of thing. And if you're on the East Coast, you can think of it as a 3 p.m. coffee break. And if you're in Europe and beyond, it's probably going to be in the evening for you. Hopefully not too late in the evening. So yeah, I hope you join me. It's going to be fun. We're going to get to know each other. You can ask some questions. You can show some exercises if you've done some. Anything you want. We can just kind of hang out. Okay? The link to the webinar is in the description. By the way, if you're not seeing this in the video, in the week, it was released, there's still going to be a link in the description. It's going to go to either another webinar, because I'm going to do these periodically, or it will go to a recording of one of the webinars. Okay? So either way, check it out, check the description, see what's there. Oh, almost forgot. There's an important announcement at the end of the video. Thank you, Bicycle. And I think now with that, we're absolutely ready to see the very last lesson of capture. Here we go.
The left brain has kind of a bad reputation with artists because of its tendency to judge and criticize, especially when things are a bit more experimental. And admittedly, the left brain is a strict, no fooling around kind of guy, and creativity does require some fooling around. And that's why many books has been written that urge artists to actually completely shut out their left brain and only work with their more lenient right brain. To me, this is a strange advice. What of all the wonderful advantages of left brain thinking? Structure, clarity, control, editing. Aren't those important? And besides, it really defies common sense. I mean, we have these two amazingly powerful perception tools at our disposal. And why in the world would we want to just ignore one of them? Clearly, these two systems complete each other perfectly, like a yin and yang circle. The advantages of one are exactly the drawbacks of the other and vice versa. Also, just like having two eyes give our sight depth, like we said before, it seems clear to me at least that these two systems, when used in unison, give us a kind of perception depth that is not achievable using just one of them. Since captures are an elegant form of communicating your perception, obviously the quality and the depth of your perception is going to have a lot of impact on your captures and on your entire creative results. Virtually every work of art in any field requires working with both your brains in order to be any good at all. Is it true that these two contrasting thinking engines can become conflicted and start working against each other and end up harming your work? Well, yeah, definitely. It happens all the time. But is this a really good reason to simply discard half your brain power? It seems to me that a better advice would be to learn how to synergize your two brains. In other words, learn how to be very good at getting them to work really well together. It's worth mentioning that it's actually really hard to not use both brains. This, for example, is a very rough and dirty, very wet capture. But even so, you can see how some structural thinking is still there. Body parts like arms and body and head are pretty clear, and that's left brain work. Then on the other side, this is a very left brain capture, but intuition still plays a part in getting an appealing arrangement. Without some right brain intuition playing a role, this capture would be anatomically correct maybe, but completely lifeless. It would be like something a computer might have generated. Anyway, this is not what I mean when I talk about synergizing our two brains. What I mean is a deliberate and calculated control over which brain kicks in when. I can offer 3 techniques to help you do that. They're called layering, clustering, and blending. Layering is the easiest. It means that you layer your captures, alternating right brain and left brain work with each layer. This works really well when you work in passes. In this example, the first stage is pretty wet. You can see that there isn't much structure or any well-defined parts. The next pass is also quite wet, and then the third and the fourth passes are very dry, accurate, controlled, with body parts clearly marked and defined. The second synergy technique I can offer is called clustering. This is a really nice way of getting both brains to work together and yet separately. The idea is to do a dry series of wet captures. Here's an example. This is a capture of an animation scene. As a drawing, each pose is a messy and intuitive wet capture. You can see it's not very structural and just a really emotional kind of doodle. However, as a capture for an animation shot, the series of drawings is a totally left-brain thing. Think about it, each pose is an element in a dry structure. You can see this by the fact that it's very editable. You can edit it by taking poses out, putting poses in, changing the order of poses, making poses longer or shorter, and so on. And this is a very clear mark of left-brain work. Here's another example from a different medium, writing. The bulleted headlines are left-brain solution. Again, that idea of easily editable structure. But every such headline, in and of itself, is a wet capture, a pretty emotional representation of what that part is going to be like. The third technique I can offer is the most difficult, and that's called blending, which just means using both brains simultaneously. And that one requires quite a bit of experience and practice, so don't be discouraged if it doesn't work right away for you. In this Jumping Pirate series, you can clearly see the holistic thinking in every drawing. Stretched, forward arch, backward arch, and so on. But you can also see the structural thinking, anatomical marks, belt marks, and other left brain tricks that help keep the whole thing clear, anatomically correct, and proportionally consistent. So each drawing in the series is actually made of both left brain reliability and right brain fluidity and energy. One more technique I'd like to offer is not really a technique at all, but more of a general advice. And the advice is, balance your brains. And here's what I mean by that. Just like you have a strong hand, the one you feel more comfortable using for the more subtle stuff, you also have a strong brain. Now, think about professional basketball players, for example. They also have a strong hand, but to be good at what they do, they have to balance it. They need to practice dribbling with their weaker hand and bring it to more or less the same level as the stronger hand. Well, your main creativity tool is your brain. And so, in order to be good at what you do, you'll want to figure out which is your strong brain, so to speak, and then practice capturing with the other one to get it up to speed. Do that, and you'll see a real boost in your capturing skills, and therefore your creative results as a whole. Well, you've made it. I'm proud of you. I know this wasn't the easiest topic in the world. Nevertheless, I hope I have been able to give you several solid, practical working tools that you can put to use instantly. On a less practical and kind of deeper note, I hope I've been able to give you a sense of just how fundamental, how critical the capture skill is for the entire creative process. This will become even more pronounced in the next 3 Go Create courses. We'll just be using capturing all the time, from dreaming up ideas in the second course, through exploring solutions in the third course, and all the way to the end product as we make the actual artwork in the fourth course. And of course, this is the reason I chose to place Go Capture as the first step in the Go Create program. What I'd like to do now is quickly run through the entire course and review everything we've learned. We started by saying capture was a way of describing something quickly and clearly in any creative medium. I urged you to get personal, because capture is by definition a subjective interpretation. And we also talked about your 2 main interpretation tools, the right brain and the left brain. Then we got practical and identified sort of activation switches for each of our 2 brains. If you want the flow and the passion of the wet capture, ask yourself, how do I feel about it? If you want the control and structure of the dry capture, ask yourself, what is it made of? Or how is it constructed? Of course, usually we'll want to involve both brains, and we've identified 3 techniques for collaborating our brains: layering, clustering, and blending. A few other tricks and techniques we've discussed are exaggeration, moving between different levels of simplification, and the magic created when adding just a few details to a very broad, big picture kind of capture. Now, there's a danger here that I'm totally aware of, and you should be aware of it too. I've been teaching for many years and I've seen this happen many times. When you analyze something so simple as capture that expansively, students can get intimidated. Like, wait, what did he say? Am I supposed to be doing the right brain thing or the left brain thing, or was it both, and what about the details? And the trick for avoiding that kind of trap, not just with capture by the way, but with everything you learn really, is to think about the principles when you practice, not when you work. When you work, just work. Forget about all the principles and tricks and techniques that you've learned and just concentrate on what you're trying to make. Your knowledge will diffuse into your work naturally over time if you practice. And you've got to give it that time. This is not something you can rush. This advice is so important and so rarely mentioned, and it's so different to what most students try to do all the time, that even if all you ever get from this entire course is just this one advice, I would argue that it was still worth it.
Hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you enjoyed all the lessons so far. After the webinar, we're going to start talking about concept, how to come up with ideas on demand, how to make them more original, how to never get stuck in front of an empty page, and all of that jazz. I promised I'm going to have an announcement for you, and here it is. So we had 7 lessons so far, 2 introduction lessons and 5 capture lessons, and they're going to stay online forever. Everything I do after capture, so starting with the concept element and all the rest of them, I'm going to leave the videos online only until we're done with that specific element. And then once we're done, I'm going to make all those videos private, so they're not going to be accessible as we transition to the next element in the series. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want you to be with me in the journey. I want to keep capture there because it's such an essential and fundamental part of the workflow, and it has to do with all of them, so I want you to always be able to reference that. But for the rest of them, I just want you to be with me in the journey, so that, you know, as we move forward and we do the webinars and we talk about things and you write me comments, I want it to be all over the place. Also for my time, I won't have time to answer every comment on every video, you know, because there's going to be a lot of them. So I really want you to be with me at my side as we go through the journey. By the way, if you want to own the series, to just have it for yourself, watch it at your own pace, go back and forth as much as you want, then you'll be able to do that. I'm going to make it available for purchase at some point. Stay tuned for that if that's something you're interested in. I think that's it for this video. As always, if you like what's happening here, if you like workflow, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you next time and in the webinar.